The story opens with Emma, a bright, adventurous young woman who has always prided herself on her independence. She moved to the city for college and quickly learned to navigate its bustling streets and crowded coffee shops, relishing her freedom and independence. While she missed her family back home, Emma was thriving, soaking up the energy of the city and the diversity of the people around her. Her life was vibrant, filled with new friends, college courses, and endless dreams. One evening, feeling particularly introspective, she decided to join an online community focused on her love for art. It was a lively place, brimming with artists, musicians, and writers from around the world. Among them, she noticed a profile that stood out, Alex. His bio said he was a musician and an art enthusiast with a soft spot for travel. Just like her, Alex reached out, his first message respectful and genuine, complimenting her artwork. From there, a connection blossomed. At first, their conversations were casual and friendly. They shared details about their favorite songs, talked about their dreams to travel, and exchanged art. It was easy to talk to him. Almost too easy. Emma felt as though she'd known Alex forever. He seemed to understand her deeply, in ways few people did. She often found herself looking forward to their conversations, which soon became the highlight of her day. It was thrilling to find someone who not only appreciated her creativity but also shared her passions. Slowly but surely, Alex gained her trust. Over time, Alex began to open up more about his life, sharing stories that made him seem vulnerable, even a bit mysterious. He confided in Emma about a difficult past, about times when he felt isolated and lost. These stories made her want to be there for him even more, to be his friend and support. Little by little, she began to share her own insecurities, her worries about school, her dreams of making a difference. In these moments, Emma felt a unique bond with him that seemed unbreakable. But beneath the surface, Alex's words started changing, growing bolder, more personal. He began to make small requests, first, simple gestures of trust, and later, requests that pushed Emma's comfort zones, always phrased in ways that made her feel as if he needed her. Her guard was down. Then came the invitation. Alex wanted to meet in person. He suggested it so casually, so naturally, that Emma didn't think to question it. She was excited but also nervous. Her friends expressed concern, urging her to be cautious. She laughed it off, telling them they didn't know him like she did. After all, he'd become a big part of her life, and she couldn't imagine that anything could go wrong. The day of the meeting arrived. A sunny afternoon that felt perfect for an adventure. Emma put on her favorite dress, feeling both nervous and exhilarated. They had agreed to meet at a cafe in a quiet part of town. She arrived early, heart pounding, anticipation building as she glanced at every face that walked through the door. She waited and waited, but Alex didn't show up. Just as she was about to leave, her phone buzzed with a message from him, apologizing profusely. He claimed he'd been delayed and begged her to meet him at a nearby location instead. Though her instincts tingled with unease, Emma's desire to finally meet him overpowered her caution. She reassured herself, believing in the connection they had built. She made her way to the new location, her steps hesitant but determined. The place was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the bustling cafe. When Alex appeared, he wasn't exactly as she had pictured, but she brushed off her discomfort, telling herself not to judge. Yet as the moments passed, the atmosphere grew tense. Emma felt her heart race, a creeping sense of dread seeping into her bones. What had once felt like a magical connection was morphing into something menacing. Something dangerous. The encounter that followed shattered her trust. Not only in Alex but in herself. The aftermath was a whirlwind of fear, shame, and confusion. Emma returned home. Her heart broken. Her spirit shaken. She felt lost. Betrayed by the trust she had given so freely. What had begun as an innocent friendship turned into a traumatic experience that left her scarred. Haunted by the memories and the questions that came with them. In the weeks that followed, Emma's mind was a storm of emotions. She struggled with guilt, with anger, with an overwhelming sense of betrayal. But beneath all the pain, a spark of resilience remained, a faint hope that one day she could find healing and maybe even a way to help others avoid the same fate. She didn't yet know how. But something deep within her told her that her story wasn't over. Emma was a young woman with an artist's heart, full of dreams and curiosity. Ever since she moved to the city for college, her life had felt like a whirlwind of colors and possibilities. She was independent, daring, and thrilled by the idea of shaping her own future. In the evenings, after her classes and part-time job, she would curl up with her sketchbook, drawing to the sounds of city life filtering through her apartment window. One evening, Emma found herself feeling introspective and, on a whim, joined an online art forum to connect with others who shared her passion. She quickly became engrossed in the community. People from all over the world posted their artwork, their music, their writing, and she felt an immediate sense of belonging. The profiles were as varied as the art itself. But one in particular caught her eye, Alex. Alex's profile was simple, unassuming. He had shared a few drawings, abstract and intriguing, and his bio said he was a musician and an art enthusiast with a love for travel. Intrigued, Emma clicked on his profile. And soon enough, he messaged her with a casual hello. His first words were respectful and genuine, mentioning how he admired her artwork and asking her what inspired her. Something about his approach felt different, refreshing even. Over the following weeks, their connection deepened. They talked about their favorite musicians, the places they hoped to visit, and their art. Alex would send her photos of sketches he'd made during his travels. Landscapes and cityscapes that looked almost dreamlike. He spoke in poetic metaphors, weaving mystery and depth into every conversation. Emma was captivated. He had a way of making her feel seen, appreciated in a way that felt rare. She shared her fears, her insecurities, her ambitions, things she'd never shared with anyone, not even her closest friends. Gradually, Alex opened up too, sharing stories about his own struggles. He confided in her about a difficult childhood and the loneliness he often felt. Even as he traveled the world, his words felt vulnerable, as though he trusted her with a side of himself that no one else knew. He admitted that sometimes he felt lost, a musician constantly searching for a place to belong. It was the sort of story that resonated deeply with Emma, and she felt a strong desire to be there for him. As their conversations continued, Emma found herself growing more emotionally invested in Alex. Every message from him felt like a new chapter in a novel she couldn't put down. When he started suggesting they video call, she hesitated but eventually agreed. Their conversations moved from text to voice, and hearing his voice, warm and inviting, only strengthened her feelings. She shared more of her life with him. Little by little, they laughed over inside jokes, shared late-night thoughts, and began referring to each other as soul friends. For the first time, Emma felt as though she had met someone who truly understood her. But then, Alex's tone shifted subtly. He began making small requests, a photo of her, a longer voice message, His requests seemed innocent enough. Small expressions of their connection. So she obliged. Yet, as time went on, his requests became bolder, tinged with an intensity that felt both exciting and a bit unnerving. He often phrased his requests in ways that made her feel essential to his happiness. His emotional stability. She found herself rationalizing each request, brushing aside any reservations because she didn't want to lose the connection they had built. The intimacy they shared felt unique, and she didn't want to question it. Then, one evening, Alex sent a message that made her heart race. "I think it's time we meet in person. Emma. I want to finally see you face to face." He suggested a meeting at a quiet cafe he'd visited once before and spoke of it as if it were a magical, hidden place where they could have their own world for a day. The idea filled her with both excitement and trepidation. Meeting someone she'd only known online was new territory. And though she hesitated, her longing to finally connect with him in person overpowered her doubts. She rationalized it. He had shared so much with her. So much of himself. Surely, he wouldn't suggest this if he wasn't sincere. She confided in her closest friends, telling them about her plan to meet Alex. To her surprise, they were hesitant, voicing concerns and encouraging her to be cautious. But Emma brushed them off, telling herself they didn't understand. They didn't know Alex the way she did. How could they understand the connection she had with him? And so, she ignored her friends' warnings, focusing instead on what she imagined would be a beautiful, unforgettable day. The day of the meeting arrived. Emma dressed carefully, putting on her favorite dress and a touch of makeup. Her heart raced with a mixture of excitement and nervousness as she made her way to the cafe they had agreed on. She arrived early, feeling her anticipation grow with each passing minute. The cafe was quaint and charming, just as he described. And she chose a seat by the window, looking out, waiting to catch sight of him. As the minutes ticked by, however, an odd feeling settled over her. She began to wonder if he'd gotten cold feet or if something had come up. Just as she was about to leave, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Alex, apologizing and explaining that he'd been delayed. He asked her to meet him at a nearby location instead, a more private, secluded spot. Something about the request felt off. A twinge of unease stirring in her mind. But she brushed it aside. After all, they had come this far, and she couldn't let a small change of plans ruin the day. She took a deep breath, texted back that she'd be there soon, and left the cafe. As she walked to the new location, the city around her seemed to grow quieter, the streets emptier. The once bright day began to feel shadowed. But she pushed the feeling away, focusing on the thought of finally seeing Alex. When she arrived, however, she immediately sensed that something was wrong. The place was too quiet, too deserted. Her heart began to pound, a cold dread washing over her. She hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to leave. But before she could turn around, a figure approached. The man who stood before her didn't look exactly like the Alex she'd imagined. His face was familiar yet different. His presence darker, more intimidating. She realized, with a sinking feeling, that she had made a terrible mistake. Panic surged within her as she tried to gather her thoughts, to find an excuse to leave. But his gaze held her in place, and she felt trapped, like a fly caught in a spider's web. What followed was a blur, a terrifying, disorienting experience that left her shaken to her core. The reality of what had happened hit her only afterward, as she stumbled home in shock, her mind a whirlwind of fear, shame, and regret. Emma returned to her apartment, collapsing onto her bed, her heart shattered. her spirit broken. She couldn't believe what had happened. Couldn't fathom how she had allowed herself to be so vulnerable. So exposed. Her trust had been shattered. Not only in Alex but in herself. In the days and weeks that followed, Emma struggled to process the event. Replaying it over and over in her mind. Questioning every decision she had made. Every sign she had ignored. She felt lost. Haunted by the memory. By the sense of betrayal that cut deeper than any physical wound. Her vibrant life felt dull. Her art forgotten. She couldn't even bring herself to open the online forum where it had all started. She was a shell of the person she had once been. Consumed by guilt and anger. Struggling to make sense of her pain. Yet, beneath the layers of anguish, a small, stubborn spark remained, a faint glimmer of hope that perhaps, one day, she could find a way to heal. It was a quiet, fragile hope. But it was there, urging her forward, whispering that her story wasn't over, that perhaps there was a reason for her pain, a purpose she had yet to discover in the days following her traumatic encounter. Emma felt like she was drifting through a surreal haze. The world around her seemed dull, muted. The vibrant city that had once filled her with energy now felt foreign and uninviting. She no longer recognized herself in the mirror. She barely left her apartment. Too ashamed and fearful to face anyone. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Of being unsafe. Even in the comfort of her own home. Paranoia gripped her. Making her feel isolated and alone. As Emma withdrew from her usual activities, her friends grew concerned. They reached out repeatedly, asking if she was okay. But she ignored their calls and messages. How could she possibly explain what had happened? The shame she carried felt suffocating. And she couldn't bear the thought of anyone knowing the truth. Each time she closed her eyes, memories of that day replayed in her mind. Vivid and haunting. As if her mind were punishing her for her mistakes. In those first few weeks, Emma found herself sinking deeper into despair. Haunted by the what-ifs. What if she hadn't answered Alex's initial message? What if she had listened to her friend's warnings? She blamed herself for being naive. For trusting too easily. And those feelings of guilt grew heavy. Dragging her down. Every time she tried to distract herself, through drawing, reading, or watching TV, her mind drifted back to Alex and the dark encounter that had shattered her trust. At night, when the world was silent, her thoughts grew loud, consuming her. She would stare at her phone, scrolling through their old messages, searching for clues she might have missed. Each message felt like a breadcrumb leading her back to the beginning. To the first time she had ignored her instincts. To the first time she had chosen to trust him. She saw now that there had been subtle hints in his words. Small signs of manipulation masked by his charm. She wished she could turn back time. To warn herself before it was too late. But as weeks turned into months, Emma began to feel a faint stirring within her. She couldn't continue living in this shadow of pain and fear. Slowly, she realized she didn't want Alex's actions to define her life. She wanted to reclaim her sense of safety. Her sense of self. And perhaps even find a way to help others avoid the same trap. Yet, even with this glimmer of hope, she struggled with the fear of facing the world again. The very thought of logging back into her art forum filled her with anxiety. As though Alex's ghost still lingered there, waiting for her. One evening, after yet another restless night, Emma found herself browsing online articles about online safety and scams. She read stories from other women who had gone through similar experiences, finding comfort in their words. There were moments when she cried, both for them and for herself, realizing that she was not alone, that others had been deceived and manipulated in ways heartbreakingly similar to her own. As she read, her sadness began to mix with something else, a simmering anger at how easily people could fall victim to predators. At how those like Alex took advantage of trust and kindness. With trembling hands, she clicked through article after article, absorbing advice and tips for online safety. She learned about catfishing, the term for when someone assumes a false identity online to deceive another person, often for malicious or self-serving purposes. She discovered tactics these predators used, gaining trust, exploiting vulnerabilities, and then isolating their victims. Emma felt a chill realizing how textbook her own experience had been. For the first time, she saw her situation from a new perspective, one that made her want to take action, to understand, and to rise above. Still, the journey forward was far from easy. She began attending therapy, taking hesitant steps toward healing. Sitting across from her therapist, Emma struggled to share her story, her voice shaking with each painful detail. But as she spoke, she felt some of the weight begin to lift. It was as if, by bringing her pain into the open, she could finally begin to untangle the web of emotions that had trapped her. Each session helped her peel away layers of guilt and self-blame, helping her understand that her trust, her willingness to believe in others, was not a weakness but a strength. She was beginning to see herself not as a victim, but as a survivor. Someone who could emerge stronger, wiser, and ready to protect herself and others. Her therapist introduced her to support groups, places where people gathered to share their experiences and find strength in each other. At first, Emma felt reluctant to join, fearing that her story wouldn't measure up, that her pain wouldn't be understood. But on a rainy evening, she gathered the courage to attend her first meeting. She sat in a circle with strangers, each of whom had their own story of betrayal, of trust shattered. Listening to them, Emma realized the universality of her experience. She saw faces marked by pain but also by resilience and courage. For the first time since the incident, she felt a sense of community, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could heal and even help others do the same. As she continued attending these meetings, Emma began to share small parts of her story. And with each retelling, her voice grew steadier, her heart a little lighter. She discovered a sense of solidarity, a quiet strength that came from knowing she was not alone. Over time, her anger and sadness began to transform into something else, a drive, a determination to turn her experience into a force for good. Emma still had moments of doubt, nights when the memories crept back. But she now had tools to face them. She learned grounding techniques, journaling exercises, and the power of community. Her art, which had once felt hollow, began to take on new meaning. She started creating pieces that reflected her journey, raw, emotional depictions of pain, healing, and resilience. Her art became her voice, a way to process her emotions and express the lessons she was learning along the way. And then, one day, as she was sketching in a quiet park, an idea struck her. She realized that she wanted to share her story, not just with her support group, but with a wider audience. She wanted to raise awareness about the dangers of online deception, to offer a warning and a hand of support to those who might be struggling as she once had. The thought terrified her, but it also filled her with purpose. She could be a voice, a beacon for those who felt lost in the dark. Emma knew that sharing her story would be a long journey, but she was ready to take the first step. She wasn't sure how the world would receive it, but she believed in the importance of her message. She wanted people to know that their trust, their kindness, was not a weakness, and that there were ways to protect themselves and find healing, even after the deepest betrayals. Her pain, Her experience could be a lesson, a lifeline for someone else. As she sat there, watching the sun set over the city, Emma felt a quiet strength settle within her. She was no longer the person she had been before Alex. But she was someone stronger, someone wiser, and someone ready to reclaim her life. Her journey was just beginning, and she was determined to make it one of healing, growth, and purpose. After Emma's decision to share her story, a new struggle began, a battle between her desire to speak out and the fear that still haunted her. It was one thing to dream about sharing her experience, it was another to actually do it. The thought of putting her pain out there for the world to see terrified her. She imagined the judgment, the questions, the potential backlash. But a part of her knew she had to face these fears if she was ever going to move forward. Each morning, she would open her laptop and stare at a blank document, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She would start writing, describing her experience with Alex, only to stop, delete the words, and start again. Memories of that day would flood back, pulling her into an emotional undertow that left her feeling raw and vulnerable. She would close her laptop, exhausted by the effort, the fear, and the shame. In therapy, Emma began working through the emotional barriers holding her back. She was surprised to find that her deepest fears weren't of Alex or the encounter itself, but of the judgment she expected from others, and herself. She feared the stigma, the whispers, the pity that might follow if she shared her story. The idea of being labeled, of having her trauma define her, felt unbearable. Her therapist helped her dig into these fears, guiding her through exercises that forced her to confront the shame and self-blame she had internalized. With each session, Emma began to unravel the complex emotions she'd buried. She realized she hadn't just lost her trust in Alex, she had lost her trust in herself. She questioned her own judgment, doubted her instincts, and feared that she would never again be able to navigate the world without doubting her choices. Rebuilding her sense of self became her mission, even if it was one slow step at a time. One day, Emma received a call from a friend she hadn't spoken to in months, someone who had once been part of her daily life. Her friend expressed genuine concern, apologizing for not reaching out sooner and assuring her that she was there to listen whenever Emma was ready. At first, Emma's instinct was to brush her off, to pretend everything was fine. But something in her softened, and she found herself opening up, telling her friend bits and pieces of what had happened. Her friend listened without judgment, offering nothing but kindness and understanding. That conversation reminded Emma of the healing power of connection, of how, even in her darkest moments, she was not truly alone. Gradually, Emma began to reconnect with other friends as well, each interaction helping her rebuild her sense of community and trust. She found that the people who truly cared about her were there to listen, to support her without trying to fix or judge her. It was a slow process, but with every conversation, she felt her confidence growing. She began to feel a glimmer of her old self returning, a stronger, wiser version shaped by the pain she had endured. But the path to healing was not linear. There were nights when she lay awake, haunted by memories of Alex's voice, by the feeling of helplessness that had consumed her. On these nights, she would find herself staring at the ceiling, wondering if she would ever fully escape the grip of that experience. She began journaling, pouring her thoughts and fears onto the page, using words as a way to confront the emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. Writing became a form of therapy, a way to untangle the complex web of feelings that still lingered. One evening, in the quiet solitude of her apartment, Emma opened her laptop again and began writing her story with newfound determination. This time, the words came more freely, She didn't focus on the details of the incident itself but instead on the journey that followed, the nights spent in anguish. The days filled with guilt. The struggle to find herself again. She wrote about the pain. Yes. But also about the resilience she had discovered. The strength that had emerged from her vulnerability. As she wrote, she felt a sense of release. As though each word on the page lifted a weight from her heart. After several days of writing, she completed a draft of her story. It was raw, honest, and painful. But it was hers. She decided to share it anonymously on a forum dedicated to survivors of online deception and abuse. She wasn't sure what to expect. Part of her feared backlash, criticism, or indifference. But as the first comments trickled in, Emma was overwhelmed by the kindness and empathy of strangers. Many thanked her for sharing her story, for her courage and honesty. Others shared their own experiences, describing how they had faced similar situations, how they too had felt the same shame and self-doubt. For the first time, Emma felt the impact of her words, of her voice. She realized that by sharing her pain, she had created a bridge of understanding, a way for others to feel seen and validated. The messages from strangers who had walked similar paths filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in months. She had touched lives, provided comfort, and perhaps even inspired others to start their own journeys of healing. As the weeks went by, Emma became more involved in the online community. She offered support to others, shared resources she had found helpful, and even led discussions on topics like online safety and self-care. She began to see herself not as a victim but as a survivor. Someone who had been through darkness but had found a way to bring light to others. Each interaction strengthened her resolve, reminding her of the importance of her voice. Encouraged by the positive response, Emma took the next step. She decided to share her story on her personal blog, under her real name. This was a daunting decision, one that made her heart race with fear. She knew that this would expose her vulnerability, making her story accessible not just to strangers but to friends, family, and acquaintances. But she felt ready. She had come to terms with her past, and she wanted to use it to create change. To raise awareness about the dangers lurking online and the importance of trusting one's instincts. In the days leading up to her blog post going live, Emma prepared herself mentally, revisiting her support group and discussing her decision with her therapist. She reminded herself that her story, though painful, was now a source of strength, a testament to her resilience. When she finally hit publish, she felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration, as if she were standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to leap into the unknown. The response to her blog was overwhelming. Friends reached out with words of support, some admitting they had been through similar experiences and had never felt able to talk about them. Strangers sent messages of encouragement, thanking her for her bravery. Her story sparked conversations about online safety, about the need for awareness, and about the importance of mental health support for survivors. Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose. She began volunteering with a local organization dedicated to supporting survivors of online abuse, sharing her story in workshops and presentations. She became an advocate, a voice for those who felt silenced by fear and shame. Each time she spoke, she felt her own strength growing, her confidence returning. She was no longer the same person who had trusted Alex so freely. But she was proud of the person she had become, a person who had taken her pain and turned it into something meaningful. Something that could help others avoid the same fate. Through her advocacy, Emma found healing. She had turned her struggle into a source of empowerment, not only for herself but for those around her. And though the journey had been filled with pain, she knew she had found a new purpose. A way to bring light to a world that could sometimes feel so dark. Her story was no longer a source of shame, but a testament to her resilience. A symbol of the strength that lay within her all along. As Emma's story spread across her blog and the online support forums, she found herself navigating a whirlwind of emotions she hadn't anticipated. Messages of support poured in from people she hadn't spoken to in years. From old classmates and colleagues, and even distant family members. They wrote to express admiration, to share their own experiences, or simply to thank her for having the courage to speak out. At first, each message felt like a balm to her soul, reminding her that she was not alone and that her story had touched others. But as the days went on, Emma also faced a wave of doubt and vulnerability she hadn't fully prepared for. As her story circulated, she felt exposed, as though the most intimate parts of herself were now open to public scrutiny. She questioned whether sharing had been the right decision, whether she had been too honest, too vulnerable. She feared that she might be seen as nothing more than that girl with the online scam story, a label that felt both reductive and stifling. She worried that people would view her through a lens of pity or, worse, judgment. To manage these complex emotions, Emma immersed herself in her newfound advocacy work. The local support organization she joined became a sanctuary, a place where she could channel her pain into purpose. She attended weekly meetings, facilitated support groups, and slowly began to take on a leadership role, guiding others through their own struggles with empathy and understanding. Listening to others' stories gave her perspective, showing her that healing wasn't just about her own journey but also about helping others find hope and strength in theirs. Through her work with the organization, Emma met Lucy, a fellow volunteer who had a quiet, resilient strength that immediately drew Emma in. Lucy had survived her own traumatic experiences, and though she rarely spoke of them, her empathy and insight hinted at deep, personal pain. Lucy became both a mentor and a friend, guiding Emma through the ups and downs of her advocacy work and teaching her how to navigate the emotional toll it often took. One afternoon, as they sat together over coffee, Emma confided in Lucy about the doubts that had plagued her since sharing her story. She confessed her fear of being defined by her trauma, of being seen as broken or weak. Lucy listened, nodding thoughtfully before offering Emma a piece of advice that would stay with her for years. You're not just telling your story for yourself, Emma. You're telling it for everyone who hasn't found the words yet. For everyone who's still afraid to speak. Your story isn't a weakness, it's a bridge. Those words resonated deeply with Emma, reframing her understanding of her own journey. She began to see her story not as a burden but as a tool, a way to connect, to educate, and to empower. Lucy's mentorship became a guiding light, helping Emma find a new perspective on her pain and a renewed sense of purpose. With this renewed perspective, Emma decided to expand her advocacy work. She collaborated with the organization to launch a series of workshops on online safety, self-care, and resilience. She poured her energy into creating presentations and materials, drawing on her own experience to craft lessons that felt both practical and compassionate. Her goal wasn't just to educate people about the technical aspects of online safety, but to help them understand the emotional impact of digital deception and the importance of trusting their instincts. At first, speaking in front of groups filled Emma with anxiety. Standing in a room full of strangers, sharing her story openly, felt almost as vulnerable as her initial blog post. But each time she spoke, she felt a small surge of confidence, a quiet sense of accomplishment. She watched as audience members listened intently, some nodding along, others wiping away tears. She saw the impact of her words, felt the connection she was building with people who, like her, had felt lost and isolated in their own struggles. Through these workshops, Emma met people from all walks of life, young students, professionals, parents, even elderly individuals, all of whom shared a common desire to feel safer and more empowered online. Their stories varied, but the emotions were often the same: betrayal, shame, guilt, and the desire to heal. Emma listened to each story with an open heart, offering support and empathy, knowing firsthand the weight of those emotions. As her advocacy work grew, Emma also began to receive requests for interviews and public speaking engagements. Journalists wanted to profile her journey, and local organizations invited her to speak at events. The thought of putting herself in the public eye, of sharing her story with an even larger audience, was daunting. But Emma remembered Lucy's words, reminding herself that her story was a bridge, a way to reach others who needed to hear it. During her first public speaking event, standing in front of a packed auditorium, Emma felt a familiar surge of nerves. Her hands shook slightly as she held the microphone. But as she looked out at the audience, she saw faces filled with anticipation, curiosity, and compassion. She took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice steady as she recounted her journey. She spoke about the dangers of online deception, the importance of trusting one's instincts, and the resilience she had found through her struggles. By the end of her speech, the room was silent, a powerful stillness that resonated with Emma. As she stepped off the stage, people approached her, thanking her, sharing their own experiences, and expressing gratitude for her bravery. With each event, Emma's confidence grew. She began to see herself not just as a survivor but as a leader, someone who had taken her pain and transformed it into something meaningful. She was no longer defined by her trauma, she was defined by the strength and compassion that had emerged from it. Her story had become a tool for change, a way to help others find their own paths to healing. In time, Emma's blog evolved into a comprehensive website dedicated to online safety and emotional well-being. She included resources, guides, and articles, all aimed at helping people protect themselves and heal from digital deception. Her website became a hub for survivors, a place where they could find support, share their stories, and connect with others who understood their pain. Emma received messages from people all over the world, thanking her for her work, for her bravery, for giving them a voice. Through it all, Emma never forgot the journey that had brought her here. She still had moments of doubt, nights when memories of Alex haunted her, reminding her of the vulnerability she had once felt. But those memories no longer controlled her. They were simply part of her story, a chapter in the larger narrative of her resilience and growth. Emma had reclaimed her life, her sense of self, and her purpose. In the quiet moments, she would reflect on the people who had helped her along the way: her therapist, her friends, her support group, and Lucy, who had given her the wisdom and courage to see her story as a bridge. She was filled with gratitude for each of them, for the way they had helped her turn her pain into something beautiful, something that could help others. Emma's journey was far from over, but she had found a peace she never thought possible. She had taken her trauma and turned it into a source of strength, a beacon of hope for others who were struggling. Her story had become a testament to the power of resilience, of healing, and of finding purpose in the face of pain. And though the road had been long and difficult, Emma knew that she had found her way, not just for herself, but for everyone who needed to know that they too could survive, heal, and thrive. Emma's advocacy efforts began to reach new heights. Her website continued to attract attention, not just from survivors but also from professionals and educators looking to create safer online environments. The feedback she received was overwhelmingly positive, and with each message of gratitude or story shared, Emma felt her mission deepen. She began collaborating with other organizations, hosting events, and even co-authoring guides with professionals in mental health and cyber safety. Her work was impacting lives, offering support to those still struggling and helping people prevent future harm. Yet, as her public presence grew, Emma encountered new challenges. Some individuals questioned her motivations, suggesting that she was exploiting her story for attention. Others criticized her approach, claiming she was overreacting or being too dramatic about online safety. Although she knew these voices were few compared to the outpouring of support, their words cut deep, reopening wounds she had thought were healing. She found herself wrestling with self-doubt once again, questioning her ability to carry the weight of her story and her mission. During one especially challenging week, she received a message from a young woman named Sarah, who had stumbled upon Emma's story while searching for advice on dealing with a similar experience. Sarah poured out her heart, sharing details of a relationship that had turned manipulative and left her feeling alone and ashamed. She thanked Emma for her courage, explaining that reading her story had given her the strength to leave a toxic situation. Emma read Sarah's message repeatedly, feeling a deep sense of responsibility and connection. She realized that her story had given Sarah, and countless others, a voice, a lifeline she had once needed herself. This realization helped her overcome the doubts planted by critics, reminding her that her work had real, tangible effects. She responded to Sarah with encouragement, advice, and resources. And from that point forward, she chose to focus not on the critics but on the people who truly needed her support. One day, Emma received an invitation to speak at a national conference on mental health and digital safety. The event would bring together experts, activists, and survivors from across the country, all dedicated to creating a safer online world. The opportunity both excited and terrified her. She knew this would be her biggest platform yet, a chance to reach a larger audience and make a substantial impact. But it would also mean sharing her story more publicly than ever before, standing on a stage before hundreds of people and exposing her most vulnerable self. In preparation for the conference, Emma worked with her therapist to manage her nerves and build her confidence. They practiced grounding techniques, helping Emma remain calm and focused even in stressful situations. She also sought guidance from Lucy, who helped her craft her speech, ensuring it was both powerful and compassionate. Lucy encouraged her to share not only her pain but also the lessons she had learned and the growth she had experienced. "You're not just a survivor, Emma," Lucy reminded her. "You're a warrior. You've taken something dark and turned it into light. Share that with them." The day of the conference arrived, and Emma felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension as she stood backstage, listening to the muffled sounds of the audience. She glanced down at the notes in her hand, the speech she had rewritten countless times, pouring her heart into every word. When her name was announced, she took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage, feeling the spotlight on her, the weight of 1,000 eyes watching. For a brief moment, the enormity of the moment overwhelmed her. She could feel her hands trembling, her heart pounding in her chest. But then she looked out at the audience, saw the faces of people who had come to listen, to learn, to heal. She remembered Sarah, remembered every person who had reached out to her, and the fear melted away. She took another breath and began. Emma's voice was steady as she shared her story, taking the audience through her journey, the initial excitement of meeting Alex, the slow buildup of trust, the shock and trauma of the betrayal, and the arduous path to healing and advocacy. She spoke openly about the shame and guilt she had felt, the moments of doubt, and the nights spent questioning her worth. But she also spoke of the strength she had found, the purpose that had emerged from her pain, and the community of survivors who had lifted her when she couldn't lift herself. As she spoke, she saw tears in the eyes of some audience members, nods of understanding from others. She felt a profound connection, an unspoken bond that united them all. By the end of her speech, the room was silent, filled with an almost tangible energy, a mix of empathy, solidarity, and hope. When she finished, the audience rose in a standing ovation, applause that seemed to echo in her heart, affirming every step she had taken to reach this moment. In the days following the conference, Emma's life changed in ways she couldn't have anticipated. Her inbox overflowed with messages from people who had attended, each one expressing gratitude, sharing personal stories, or asking for guidance. Her story had resonated deeply, reaching people from all walks of life, inspiring conversations about online safety, mental health, and resilience. Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that her voice, her experience, was helping to shift perspectives and empower others. Driven by this momentum, Emma expanded her advocacy work even further. She developed partnerships with schools and universities, offering workshops on digital safety tailored to young adults. She created a podcast, inviting guests to share their own experiences with online manipulation and deception. The podcast quickly gained popularity, and Emma found herself speaking with psychologists, educators, and even legal experts, discussing the multifaceted issues surrounding online safety. Each episode became a tool for healing, education, and empowerment, furthering Emma's mission in ways she had never dreamed possible. Through her work, Emma became a prominent figure in the field of digital safety and mental health. But despite her growing influence, she remained grounded in her own journey, always remembering where she had started and the people who had helped her along the way. She continued her therapy sessions, understanding that healing was a lifelong process. And she kept in close contact with Lucy, her mentor and friend, who remained a source of wisdom and support. In quieter moments, Emma would sit in her apartment, reflecting on how far she had come. She was no longer the young woman haunted by the shadow of Alex, no longer defined by the trauma that had once consumed her. She had found her voice, her strength, and her purpose, transforming her pain into something beautiful, something that could bring light to others. And though her journey was ongoing, Emma knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had become a warrior, a protector, and an advocate, not just for herself but for every person who had ever felt lost, betrayed, or broken by the cruelty of deception. Her story had become a beacon, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope, always a way forward. Emma's struggle had forged her into a resilient, compassionate leader, and her journey was far from over. She would continue to fight, to speak, and to heal, knowing that each step she took was paving the way for others to do the same. Emma's journey had already taken her from darkness to a place of resilience. But she sensed a new chapter unfolding, one that would amplify her voice and her mission in ways she hadn't anticipated. After the national conference and the growth of her podcast, Emma found herself in increasing demand as a speaker and educator on online safety and mental resilience. Her story, once a source of shame and pain, had become a beacon, not just for herself but for a wide, ever-growing audience who looked to her for guidance and inspiration. With every event, Emma's confidence blossomed. She began to speak not only about her own experience but also about the broader issues surrounding digital deception and mental health. She wanted her audience to understand that her story, though personal, was emblematic of a larger issue facing millions. She spoke passionately about the need for digital literacy, the importance of trusting one's instincts, and the power of community support. Her workshops and talks became gatherings of hope and empowerment, where people felt safe to share their stories and find healing in collective understanding. Emma's impact began to attract the attention of various organizations, including schools, mental health organizations, and even government agencies interested in digital safety policies. She was invited to collaborate on creating educational materials for teenagers and young adults, guides that taught them not only about online scams and manipulative tactics but also about the importance of boundaries, consent, and self-awareness in digital spaces. The work felt meaningful, and Emma poured herself into it, knowing that these efforts would help protect young people from the very pain she had endured. One particular event marked a turning point in Emma's advocacy journey. She was invited to participate in a global summit on digital safety and human rights, alongside leaders from different fields: technology, psychology, education, and policy. It was a gathering of minds and hearts dedicated to addressing the challenges of the digital age, from cyberbullying to online exploitation and beyond. Emma felt both honored and intimidated, knowing she would be speaking alongside experts and pioneers. But when she took the stage, she spoke with a newfound strength, one that had been honed through years of struggle and healing. Emma's speech was met with thunderous applause, and afterward, several attendees approached her with ideas for potential collaborations. She was introduced to a team of developers who were working on AI-driven tools to detect and prevent online scams. Inspired by their work, Emma joined forces with them, lending her insights as a survivor to help shape a technology that would protect vulnerable users. She became an advisor on the project, her experiences adding a personal touch to the technical work. Together, they created a platform that used AI to flag potential online manipulation tactics, a tool that would soon be available to millions of users worldwide. Emma's collaboration with the developers was just the beginning. She also partnered with legal experts to advocate for stronger regulations and protections against online deception. She lobbied for policies that would hold online platforms accountable for user safety, meeting with lawmakers and attending legislative hearings to share her insights. Her tireless efforts began to yield results, as policymakers took notice and introduced new protections aimed at making the digital world a safer place for everyone. Through her advocacy work, Emma met countless people whose lives had been changed by her message. She heard from mothers who had used her advice to teach their children about online safety, from teachers who had integrated her materials into their curriculum, and from young people who had avoided harmful situations because they had learned to trust their instincts. These stories filled Emma with a deep sense of fulfillment, reminding her that her pain had been transformed into something meaningful, something that could protect others. One day, Emma received a message from Sarah, the young woman who had reached out to her in the early days of her blog. Sarah had found the courage to leave her toxic relationship and had since become an advocate for survivors of abuse. She was hosting her own support groups, helping others find healing just as Emma had once helped her. Emma felt a surge of pride and gratitude, realizing that her journey had created ripples that extended far beyond herself. She had inspired others to find strength, to take action, and to support each other in their healing journeys. Reflecting on her journey, Emma decided to write a book. She wanted to capture everything she had learned, the lessons, the struggles, the victories, in a way that could reach people even beyond the internet, beyond her public appearances. The book became her labor of love, a project into which she poured every ounce of wisdom and experience she had gained. She wrote about the importance of trusting oneself, of finding strength in vulnerability, and of building a support system that could provide comfort and guidance. She shared practical advice on online safety, as well as stories of the incredible people she had met along the way. The book, titled Strength and Shadows, was published to critical acclaim, It quickly became a bestseller, praised for its honesty, empathy, and practical wisdom. Readers from all walks of life found solace in Emma's words, and the book became a staple in support groups and therapy centers across the country. Emma received letters from readers who had found hope and healing within its pages, and she felt a profound sense of purpose, knowing that her journey continued to inspire others long after they turned the last page. As the years passed, Emma continued her work, her influence growing as she took on new projects, met new collaborators, and reached new audiences. She was a sought-after speaker, a respected advocate, and a beloved author. But above all, she was a source of hope for those still struggling to find their own strength. Emma knew that her work was far from over, that there were still countless people who needed guidance, protection, and empowerment. She remained dedicated to her mission, fueled by the knowledge that her story was making a difference, one life at a time. In quiet moments, Emma would sit in her home office, looking at the letters and photos sent to her by people who had been touched by her work. She kept them in a large scrapbook, a reminder of the lives she had impacted and the community she had built. She knew that she had turned her trauma into a force for good, that her pain had been transformed into purpose. And though her journey had been difficult, she wouldn't have changed a thing. She had found strength in her shadows, and in doing so, she had helped others find their own paths to healing. Emma's story was one of resilience, transformation, and hope. She had taken the darkness of her past and turned it into a light that illuminated the way for others. Her legacy was one of compassion and courage, a reminder that even in the face of profound pain, one could find meaning, strength, and purpose. Emma had become a warrior, a protector, and an advocate, not just for herself but for every person who had ever felt lost or broken. Her journey was a testament to the power of healing, the beauty of vulnerability, and the importance of community. And as she looked toward the future, Emma knew that her work would continue, that her story would live on in the lives of those she had touched. A beacon of hope in a world that so often felt dark. She was ready to keep fighting, to keep speaking, and to keep inspiring others to find their own strength in the shadows. Emma's book, Strength in Shadows, had exceeded all her expectations, reaching people far and wide. The stories, insights, and hard-won wisdom she had poured into its pages were resonating with readers around the world. Messages from survivors, educators, parents, and young adults flooded her inbox, each one affirming that her story had made a difference. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a deep gratitude that her painful experience had been transformed into a powerful source of hope and education. As demand grew, Emma found herself immersed in projects she had once only dreamed of. She was invited to universities and schools not only to speak but to help design entire curricula centered on online safety, resilience, and emotional intelligence. Emma became a guest lecturer, her talks captivating students who were navigating the complexities of the digital world. She taught them not only to recognize the red flags of online deception but also to understand the importance of setting boundaries, developing self-respect, and building strong support systems. Emma was also approached by a major mental health organization that wanted to launch a nationwide campaign focused on digital safety and mental health awareness. She eagerly joined the team as a spokesperson and consultant, lending her personal story and expertise to create impactful messaging that would reach a diverse audience. The campaign included social media initiatives, public service announcements, and educational content. Emma worked closely with psychologists, educators, and content creators, ensuring that each message was both sensitive and empowering. One day, while reviewing campaign materials in her office, Emma received a letter that left her speechless. It was from the parents of a teenager named Lily who had been saved from a dangerous online situation thanks to Emma's book. The letter described how Lily had read Strength in Shadows and, inspired by Emma's story, had recognized similar warning signs in an online friendship she had been developing. Realizing the potential danger, Lily had confided in her parents, and together they had taken steps to protect her. Emma's heart swelled with emotion as she read the letter. Knowing that her work had directly protected a young life reaffirmed her commitment to her mission. She reached out to Lily's family, expressing her gratitude and offering her support. They kept in touch over the years, and Emma became a mentor to Lily, guiding her through the challenges of adolescence with the wisdom she had gained through her own struggles. It was moments like these that reminded Emma of the profound impact her story was having. Not just in the abstract, but in the tangible lives of young people. As her influence grew, Emma began to expand her vision even further. She wanted to create a safe, interactive space where people could learn about online safety and share their own experiences. Teaming up with developers and mental health experts, she launched a mobile app called Safe Space, a virtual platform offering resources, support groups, and interactive tools designed to educate users about digital safety. The app allowed users to anonymously share stories, ask questions, and access guidance from professionals, all within a supportive community. Safe Space quickly gained popularity, especially among teenagers and young adults. The app's community forums became places of healing and solidarity, where users could connect with others who understood their experiences. Emma frequently participated in these forums, sharing her insights, offering encouragement, and answering questions. She saw firsthand how the app was fostering a culture of safety and compassion, a place where people could learn to protect themselves while also finding comfort in knowing they were not alone. One evening, as Emma scrolled through the forum, she came across a post from a young man named Tom. He was struggling with feelings of guilt and shame after being manipulated in an online relationship. His post was filled with self-blame, a reflection of the very emotions Emma had once wrestled with. Without hesitation, she responded to him, offering reassurance and sharing parts of her own journey. She reminded him that trust and kindness were strengths, not weaknesses, and that healing was possible. Over the weeks, Emma continued to correspond with Tom, watching as he slowly began to find his strength and self-worth. He started attending online support meetings through the app, connecting with others who had faced similar challenges. His messages grew more hopeful, and Emma felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing she had played a part in his recovery. Moments like these were her quiet victories, the ones that kept her going even on the hardest days. Emma's influence eventually extended beyond national borders. She received invitations to speak at international conferences and collaborate with organizations worldwide. She traveled to places she had only dreamed of, meeting advocates, survivors, and leaders who were equally passionate about creating a safer digital world. In each country she visited, Emma saw the universality of her mission. The faces, languages, and cultures differed, but the core issues remained the same. People everywhere needed protection, education, and support to navigate the digital landscape safely. During a conference in Europe, Emma met Dr. Sophia Karim, a renowned psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery and resilience. The two women formed an instant connection, their shared passion for mental health and advocacy creating a bond that transcended borders. Together, they envisioned a global initiative, a digital resilience program that could be implemented in schools, community centers, and online platforms worldwide. Their vision was ambitious: to equip individuals of all ages with the skills to protect themselves, to recognize manipulation, and to build mental resilience. The program, named Digital Guardians, became Emma's new focus. She and Dr. Kareem collaborated with an international team of educators, psychologists, and developers to create a curriculum that was both accessible and impactful. The program covered topics such as recognizing emotional manipulation, setting personal boundaries, fostering self-esteem, and knowing when and how to seek help. They piloted it in several countries, and the positive response was overwhelming. Teachers reported that students were more engaged, more self-aware, and more confident in their ability to navigate digital spaces. Emma's heart swelled with pride each time she received updates on the program's success. She knew that Digital Guardians was the culmination of everything she had fought for, a proactive solution that empowered people before they could become victims. Seeing students equipped with the tools she had once desperately needed filled her with a profound sense of accomplishment. Her pain had truly transformed into a force for good, reaching far beyond what she had ever imagined. As the program gained traction, Emma returned to her roots, continuing her work on the podcast and the Safe Space app, ensuring that her mission remained accessible to anyone in need. She kept in touch with the individuals she had helped, forming friendships and a community that spanned continents. Her support network, once a small circle, had grown into a global family, a testament to the power of shared stories and mutual healing. In her quieter moments, Emma would reflect on her journey, the painful beginning that had led to such profound purpose. She would revisit the letters from people whose lives she had touched, the photos and memories from her travels, and the stories of resilience she had witnessed. She had come full circle, moving from victim to survivor to advocate and, finally, to an agent of change. One evening, as she sat by her window overlooking the city lights, Emma received a message from Lily, the young woman who had once looked to her for guidance. Lily was now a psychology student, inspired by Emma's journey to pursue a career in mental health and advocacy. She shared her dream of opening a support center for young survivors of online abuse, a place where they could find the compassion and guidance Emma had once given her. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she read the message, moved by the legacy she had unknowingly created. She had not only transformed her own life but had inspired others to do the same, creating a ripple effect that would continue long after her. Emma wrote back to Lily, offering her encouragement, support, and a promise to be there every step of the way. Emma's story had become a living testament to resilience, compassion, and the power of transformation. She had found a way to turn her deepest pain into her greatest purpose, creating a legacy that would continue to protect, empower, and inspire. Her journey was not just her own, it was a beacon of hope for everyone who had ever felt lost in the shadows. And as she looked toward the future, Emma knew that her work was far from over. She would keep fighting, keep speaking, and keep building a world where trust and kindness could flourish without fear. Her story, once a source of pain, had become a story of redemption, resilience, and the endless potential for healing. Emma had found her place in the world, and she knew that her journey would continue to make a difference, one life at a time, lighting the way for all who followed in her footsteps.